All right, I'm going to very quickly cover some Nurbs content. Nurbs stands for non-uniform rational basis splines, I think. And the idea of a spline is you have a curved line that you can control with just a few points rather than having to go through and mess with all of it. If you've got any experience with Illustrator or something like that, you'll kind of understand what a spline is. I'll show you very quickly. We'll just hop over to the side view here, and I'm going to go to Create, and then Curve Tools and the CV Curve Tool. CV stands for Control Vertice, and we'll see kind of what those look like here in a minute. I'm going to add a few clicks, and as soon as I get to my fourth click, you can see now I have enough information here for my to begin to create this curve. So this is a spline curve, and if I go to my components here by just right-clicking, can go and you can see how that curve is basically just an average of the positions of its input control vertices, these purple dots here. And we can look at it in 3D. There's nothing special. It's just a curve in space. So let's look at a primitive very quickly. If you go to Create, and then Nurbs primitive sphere, if I zoom in on it. So we mentioned in the polygon editing stuff that if you tap the 1 key, the 2 key, and the 3 key, you get three different rendering styles here. Basically the low poly version and then the subdivided version. Nurbs defaults to the subdivided version. So if I tap the 1 key, we can see that we're actually getting something that looks pretty similar to polygonal geometry, but once again, if I do a right click on it, you can see I have a different set of options here. I don't have verts, faces, or edges. I do get CVs, and we can see again a CV is a control vertice. So by default, you're going to want to probably just work with Nurbs in their subdivided state, which is how they will show up. So you don't have to worry about tapping the 3 key there. But if you kind of want to understand how eventually it might convert into polygons, it's not a bad idea to tap the 1 key to just see how that works. So if I come over and like start deleting stuff, what we're going to get is it's not actually going to delete the faces like you might expect if we started coming over and deleting verts out of off a poly mesh. It's just going to have some different geometry that informs what that surface looks like. So that is a very, very basic introduction to Nurbs. Let's look at some of the things that we can do with Nurbs. I'm going to go ahead and hop back over to my curve tool, back over to CV, and then we're going to just do another right camera view here. So I'm just going to create a spline curve. And here we can see it in space. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it, Control D. So now I have 2. And what I can do is if I come over to the surfaces menu here, I have lots of things that I can do with curves. And the easiest one is a loft. So we just go ahead and loft a surface. Now the surface has construction history. If we go to the channel box editor, you can see that if I want, I can come over and add some additional spans. I can also, if I select one of the input curves, do a drag select, and then I'll just deselect the surface, go to Control Vertex. I can modify that input curve and the geometry will follow along. I can grab some of the CVs on the geo itself and modify that. And so you can very quickly get some very lovely sort of swoopy forms that are kind of nice. You don't have to limit yourself to just one pair of curves. You can have multiple curves. So we'll just, I don't know, maybe we'll just grab this one and like scale it down or something. And when you have more than one curve, I think you can just do a loft again, and it'll just go ahead and give you a nice average surface there. But so again, this looks nice, but if we were to look at it with the 1 key, you can see it's pretty crunchy. So that's the thing to keep in mind. I'll show you momentarily how to convert this into polygonal geometry. So we'll go ahead and I'll just hide these guys for now. Well, maybe I'll keep that first one and show you one more thing that you can do with these curves, which is kind of cool, is you can do a revolve. And I'm going to go ahead and just hit reverse here on the direction to get it pointing up. And there's my curve, my input curve. So if I make any changes to this, the resulting surface will update accordingly. So I guess if you wanted to make like a, I don't know, milk dropping into a glass or something, this might be one way that you could go about doing that. Let's go ahead and do something like this. Right, so maybe it's like a, I don't know, whatever. But you can make things like martini glasses. Let me show you how you might go about doing that. We'll just hop over to the right view and hide this for a second. Control H. Here is, where is it? Here's my origin. You see these two heavier lines. We'll go back to Create, Curve Tools, CV Curve. Something like this. And we'll hop over to Perspective View, throw a revolve on there, and there you go. You know, italics or something. So if you're so inclined and you want to model this kind of thing, this is not a bad way to go about doing it. And since we're looking at this, let's go ahead and talk about how you might go ahead and convert this into polygonal geo, which you will need if you want to use this kind of thing in a game engine. So again, if I tap the 1 key, we can see it's pretty low poly if we were to convert it to polys. So we're going to need to probably add some more detail to it, basically just fill in some of these open spaces with additional edges that contribute to the silhouette being preserved and being nice and smooth. So we're going to go to the Rebuild menu, which has lots of different things in it, and we're not going to worry about too much of it. So there's a few things that are worth paying attention to: the number of spans in U and V. If we look at, a good way to think of this, let me just go ahead and increase this to something like 12. So U is going to be going one direction and V is going in another direction, and I think it's kind of arbitrary. So you can see I've basically just added 12 going this way and reduced it down to 4 around, which is not very many. So 4 is going to be V and 12 is going to be U. So 12 is vertical in this case, and V is radial, I guess we could say. So what I want here is, we can leave that at 12, but I'll bump this up to 12 now. And we can see that we basically just added a lot more information, but it kind of inherited that because we started with, we reduced it to 4, it doesn't understand to add more. It just basically subdivides whatever you've got. So we'll back up a little bit. Now if I hit 12, you can see it's going to preserve that roundness. So we basically just added some additional geometry. So if I tap the 1 key, now we're getting something that feels a little bit rounder, but maybe we could even crank it up a little bit more to something like, whoops, not 126. That would be a very luxurious roundness as well. So right now I've just got the 1 key tapped. If I tap 3, this is what it's going to look like ultimately. And we do still have our construction history. So if I want to modify the curve, I can totally do that. Maybe just pull this one up a little bit, get a little thickness on that lip, and the closer these CVs get together, the tighter that transition is going to be, like so. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about converting it to polygons. What we're going to want to use here is control points. Control points is basically like wherever you see an intersection in your geometry, control points is going to put a vert there. So if I hit apply, whoops, that's not apply, that's close. Let's go back to rebuild. So go to polygons, turn on control points, and then we hit apply, and we can see that what we end up with, it's not exactly the same, but it is very close. And we will need to, whoops, I've got them both selected. We will need to reverse our geometry's normal direction, so we can do that here in mesh display reverse. And then if we want to give it thickness or something, we can just go to extrude. And go ahead and, let's see, make sure we're talking to the right direction there. So now we've given it just a little bit of some thickness, and we can do a mesh display, soften harden edges, and there you go, whatever, right? So that's how you can easily convert some nice flowy curve generated Nurbs geo into polygonal geo, which you can then pass on down the line. And let me just very quickly show you one additional thing before we leave our Nurbs lesson behind. Let me go to the outliner. Let's show this curve. So I'm going to go ahead and create some circles. So we'll go to create and then Nurbs primitive and circle. And I'm just going to kind of scale it in a little bit. I'll hit Control D to duplicate it, and then I will just make a few smaller ones here. We'll select all of these, deselect the drag selected bigger curve. So these are called profile curves, and this is called a path curve. And what we can do is we can extrude it. And this is going to be the result that we get. So let me go ahead and select the geometry. We can scoot the rebuild menu out of the way. We go to extrude, and there's a few things that we can do that will make this look a little bit nicer, or more interesting anyway. The first thing is you can see how crunchy it is, right? It's like very, very blocky. Let me make sure I've got my, yeah, so we're already in the high quality rendering mode. That's low quality. And the reason it looks as rough as it does, try that again, is it has to do with the number of points that we have on our curve. That's going to be this curve right here. So what I can do is I can actually rebuild this curve so it has a little bit more information in it. It'll preserve the curvature, but just give it more detail. And if we go to CV, we can see we've got like, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points that are making up this curve, and so it's sort of filling in the blanks here. So if I hop back over into object mode and go to curves, I'm going to tear this off momentarily, you can go to rebuild, just like we had for the geometry. And so I think I had 6 before, so we can say if we just set this to like 15, and I'll go ahead and make sure I'm in object mode, so this is now green. I'm going to tap the 5 key so that we can see what happens with our resulting geo, and hit apply, and you can see, oh, now it's nice and lovely, and our curvature is significantly improved. And as with the other operation, if I modify any of this stuff, what we'll get is the resulting Nurbs surface will update accordingly, right? So that's kind of cool. So with this extrude, we can also come over, and if we have our little rotation here, this is going to be like 360. It's going to be a full rotation all the way around. Let me make sure I've got everything selected. So if I wanted it to look nice and twisty, I can throw 720 in. And you can see we start to get this like really cool kind of bundle of wires thing, which can be a nice thing to add to your robots or whatever to make them feel like they've got something interesting happening underneath all of those panels. So, and then once again, once you've got this, all you've got to do is go to, in the surfaces, we'll go to the rebuild menu. And we don't necessarily need to worry too much about this. 12 would be a lot going around the, again, I don't know exactly which direction it is, so it's not a bad idea to set this to like something really low. And then this one can be high, and this way we can at least discover, whoops, what axis is controlling what. So it looks like longitudinal is going to be, go back to my options here, is going to be V, and so we can make this like 8, and we'll make this, I don't know, whatever, 24. And we can delete this geo and hit apply. And what we'll get is a nice, relatively nice, obviously you can add more geo to it if you want. Let's just go ahead and do that. So maybe we'll do something like 36. These numbers are kind of arbitrary. I don't think 26 will give us quite as big of a bump. There you go. And the poly counts are gonna increase accordingly as well. So once again, we just go to mesh display and reverse to get everything kind of pointing in the right direction, and then we have a nice one-to-one between our Nurbs geo, which still has our construction history on it. So what that means is if I want to come over to my, I already showed you the profile curve, but the path curve, oops, I didn't mean to add that guy. It still has construction history as well, although now we've added a lot more CVs to it. And you can see even the resulting polygonal geometry has construction history, which is pretty cool. I didn't realize that would be the case. And it's also, I don't know if you noticed or not, but the performance was pretty clunky there. So that's one of the downfalls of having a lot of construction history, is stuff can get kind of slow on the performance end. So one of the nice things that you can do if you are so inclined and you're happy with your geo and you want to move on is you can just go to edit, delete by type, and history. And so now if I want to make modifications to this, it will no longer update the output polygeo. And I can also delete construction history on the geo itself, so that if I make modifications to my path curve or profile curves, they will not be piped down the line into the new geo. So there you go. There's a crash course in Nurbs. I don't really use them that much. There's a similar tool that I really like that has a different approach to modeling. It's called Fusion 360, and there are free tutorials on my website if you are interested in that. And it kind of has a lot of this functionality, but I think it's presented in a little bit of a smarter way. So I have in my entire career never used Nurbs, but I've used Fusion 360 a bunch. So, but this is, it's good enough. You know, you can get in and play with some of these things, and you know, all the stuff can be easily Googled if you're curious about learning more about Nurbs in Maya.